Hi everyone. So I am today with a psychologist and an anthropologist and a social anthropologist, and her name is Sabine Johansson. Sabine, how do I say your name properly in your language?
Janssens.
Huh? One more time.
Janssens.
Janssens.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. Sabine
Nailed it.
is Sabine, or Sabine is also something else.
No, no, Sabine is Sabine.
Sabine is
Yeah.
Sabine. Okay. Sabine Janssen. And Sabine is from Belgium, and she's a social anthropologist. And a social anthropologist is a person who does comparative studies of ways in which people live in different social and cultural settings across the globe. Societies vary enormously in how they organize themselves, so she studies that. And as some of you might know, I believe that all the majority of the problems which countries like Pakistan face are not due to bad policies and everything, but due to the way we live. The culture is designed, and the way the culture acts, and culture goes in our veins, in our blood, in the form of habits, and those habits dictate how our economy will be and our future will be. And that is why I am very curious to learn more about how to improve our culture, how to change our habits so that we can have more habits which are more productive, less counterproductive, and allows us to build our economy, allows us to build our country in a better way. And I um believe, and well, like the history says that Europe was similar in a tribal society up till 100 years ago. There were lots of different things, and there were lots of tribes. For example, Germany was not even a country up till 120 years ago, and it was all tribes all over. I could be wrong. Looking at Sabine's eyes, she can guide me better. But then things started to change a few hundred years ago, and things became more organized, and less languages became available. So, for example, in Europe, if we look, there are a few major languages which we see, but in Pakistan alone, we have 28 languages. In India, we have 1100 languages. So it's more of a big tribal society, and each tribe has their own culture, their own norms, and they conflict with other tribes, and we are not growing. So today's subject is more about weather. I made a trip recently to the northern areas of Pakistan, and I saw that the people who live there, it's only a small population, 1.5 million people, but they they say that everything closes for 9 months, which I don't understand why, because it's extreme weather. But I thought it was very, very extreme weather, but it's not true. I have traveled in worse extreme weather in Chicago, in Vladivostok, in Europe. I have seen much worse weather compared to the weather which I have seen so far. I have not been in the northern areas in the winter, but I see that the construction quality, the ways they live their life, the kind of clothes they wear are primitive, and that might be the reason that they cannot live in the colder weather. So Sabine, thank you for taking the time. I would like the opportunity for anybody who is watching us from Gilgit-Baltistan area and the northern areas of Pakistan to connect with you and interact with you and learn what they can learn from the Belgians, and how you can sell the number one chocolate in the world without ever growing any chocolate. So we grow all kinds of stuff, but we still don't have the number one products. But one thing to learn is definitely, the Swiss and the Belgian chocolate is better than other chocolate, and it's the process which makes it better. I don't think you grow any chocolate seeds over there, do you? Again, your face looked like I was saying something wrong, but so over to you.
Um, yeah, those things you said is certainly something that discussed a lot in anthropology. because this is exactly the focus of our studies. And cultures, they get certain habits and certain ways of doing things for a reason. So of course, we have certain habits or certain automatic ways of doing things, which at some point made sense and was the best solution people could find. So sometimes these solutions, they are not so very adapted anymore later on, and that is when it becomes something that you could maybe discuss and see if there are other ways. But other solutions, and that's something that's really important, because it is not the how old a certain habit, a certain culture, certain language, or way of clothing is that makes it well or not well adapted. It's just, does it make sense in the circumstances? So if you have clothing that is ill-suited, if that is too light, then that would be ill-adapted. And some modern people, they do that. A good example is, for example, in Russia. They would say there is no bad weather, there are just clothes that are not adapted to the weather. So they would wear a lot of layers. So you don't go outside without very good boots and a very good jacket. And then, of course, you can work outside. So does that mean that traditional clothing in Russia was not good? If you would look at the jackets that people wore in Russia a few hundred years ago, you would say, no, of course not. They have the best hats and the best coats. And if you wear those, you would be as warm as you can be. So it's not that. It's just you have to see, okay, is this actually what's required in this environment? And especially in cold environments, you have to think ahead and say, okay, these are circumstances I will find myself in during the colder months. What do I do?
You were saying about the golden or about the months?
Oh, yeah, I was ending with a rhetorical question. But yeah, of course, what do? You will make sure that you have everything that's needed to prepare for the cold. And some of these things, they make sense, like wearing warm clothes, but quite often people, they just don't think of that. They say, okay, it's too cold to go outside. But several tribes, several different kinds of indigenous cultures, they are well adapted to the cold, and they have the best kind of fur clothing that you can have. So, that is one thing. But you were talking about agriculture, you were talking about things you can grow. And then again, you can see that there are a lot of different peoples that are adapted to grow food all year round, because obviously as humans, we used to live in all kinds of weather conditions, and we survived till these days. So the fact that we're all here means that it's possible. The fact that people have been living for generations in those colder regions of Pakistan shows that, of course, you can do that. And then it does make sense to say, okay, there are some of our habits, of some of the traditional ways of doing things that are quite useful nowadays, and others that maybe, you would say, but there are better solutions that we can find now. So it's not about, oh, we need to let go of all traditional ways of doing things, or, oh, we need to let go of all modern ways of doing things. No, it's just of looking how well does the solution fit in these circumstances.
Right. And since the birth of the internet and the technologies are changing and knowledge is available, smartphones are available for the last 10, 11 years, but people are not used to learning through these technologies. There are more fabrics available, and this fabric has not reached. There are more construction processes available that have not reached to this part of the world yet, and then they're still using these technologies, which are older technologies, which disallow the construction to be done in a cheap way with the right insulation, and that makes the houses very, very cold and really unbearable to live in. And then that's why the people migrate to different parts of the country, because they're still living like they used to live 1,000 years ago, and they're not adapting to the new technologies. So the most recent innovation which I saw in the northern areas this time was one of them was styrofoam, which is going all around. People are using the styrofoam blocks to put on the wall, and they don't have the spray, the styrofoam spray, which is now available commonly in Europe and in America, which makes the insulation very quickly, very cheaply, and it becomes airtight. That has I've never seen. The second one I've seen is plastic, which is used to under the carpet. So instead of using it under the carpet, they're using it on the wall, and that gives also kind of insulation. It's not styrofoam, but it's more thicker carpet, like a half an inch long, thick, and they're putting it on the wall. Instead of in the roofs, you can see bare walls covered with this styrofoam and this plastic, which is allowing them to be used for insulation. So there are lots of other technologies which I have seen in the West, which are available, and I'm hoping that after this interaction, you can talk with some people and they can share and start thinking and googling about what are the new insulation technologies which are available for construction, because Pakistan is building 5 million new houses. It's half of your population, I think. Which means that, and again, they will be using incorrect technologies to build these houses, and older technologies to build these houses, even though people, I mean, they are trying to change, but the culture stops them from changing. If you remember, old cars were very heavy and they were made of very strong steel, and now the new cars are designed aerodynamics and lighter weight so that they can go faster and use less fuel. But people still feel if something is heavy, like for example, if this microphone is big, it must be more expensive, and if it's something very small, it should be cheaper. So this kind of mentality is stuck with us because we have been learning this for over years and years. And now, since technologies have changed, a small microphone which can fit inside my glasses would be more expensive than a large microphone because it's more advanced technology. So how can I convince people, or what have you learned? How do we help people make this transition from an older thinking to a newer thinking, past internet to a post internet era?
Yeah, that's like you say, that's the good thing of the internet. We can look all over the world for different kinds of solutions people have for the same problems. And isolation is a very good um, problem to focus on, because indeed there are so many different ways to do this, and these are being constantly adapted and adjusted and tried out in different places. And the one thing you were saying, indeed, that people are not thinking a lot about how to isolate their houses the best for the weather is indeed something I've also observed. And that's something where you can have a big impact on the amount of heating you need and the costs for fuel. And especially this again has an impact for the forests and for the trees. If you have very good isolated house, you don't need to burn a lot of wood to warm your house. And it's not only plastics, it's not only new technologies, there are also a lot of old technologies that have been adjusted and perfected by looking at how is this done in different places that do the same thing. So for example, you can also use straw bales as a very good way of isolating your houses. And this is counterintuitive for many people, because you think, oh, straw is this is something that you give for your animals to feed, but it has been used in many Western places also to construct houses, and it's proven to be, in many cases, much cheaper and much more effective to have very good isolation than many of the most high-end products. So it's not necessarily so that the higher they are processed, the better they isolate. You just need to look at how they isolate, and you can now, nowadays on the internet, you can just compare them. You take a certain material, you say how well does it perform without isolation, to to deal with noise. Many people, when they have an office, it's very important that, you don't have too many echoes and you have a good noise. And then, you have also a lot of natural solutions for that, because it is quite important also to see that, we have materials that are reusable or compostable afterwards, because otherwise, Pakistan would end up as one big heap of plastic, and that would also, just give problems for the future generations, especially when you're building a lot of houses. This is quite important. And lovely examples are, for example, the earth ships that are, getting quite popular in Europe and America, as a way to just have a system that's completely adapted to the environment, and that can be even take care of its own needs. So you can have a very well isolated house that also produces their own food, and that also, takes care of their water, reuses water, uses water afterwards for the garden, so you don't waste water. And this is of course cheaper, because you don't have to have water from outside, and it has a better impact for the environment. And especially if water is scarce, this will become more and more important. So indeed, it's something to take into account and look up and say, okay, if I want to have a house that's warm enough, it's not only about fuel, but it's also about isolation. There are so many options on the market. It's good to first compare and see, okay, what's available here, what are the materials we have here, and how can we make the best use of this in my situation. So I completely agree with that, Rian. This is an important subject, and this is something where it's very useful to have connection via internet with different places that have already tried out different methods.
Okay, thank you so much. And tell us about a typical winter day where you think, say January second week, it's a lot of snow and people still go to work. How would a typical day look like? Because here they're like sitting like this in front of the stove or fire, and not going for work. There is no tourists coming in. Whereas I was saying there was a blizzard in Chicago once, and I was still traveling, and everything was fine and dandy. Of course, everything was slow, but everything was still going on. I checked into a hotel, I spent the day, and life still goes on. And as I said, I was in Vladivostok, minus 29 degrees, life still goes on. And here at 0 degrees, life stops. The water pipe stops, the everything just stops, just because they're mixing new technology with older places, and they don't understand the dynamics of the winter, and things just get challenging. So tell us about a typical day in Belgium with a lot of snow.
Well, in Belgium, we do have snow every year, but we don't have the conditions of really heavy snowfall for several weeks. Um, so inland, in countries where it is common to have a lot of snow and where I have also traveled, generally one of the first things you would do is just keep the paths clear. If you don't clear the snow away from your door from the beginning, then you might not be able to open the door. So that's one of the most important things. Every day you shovel away the snow, and then you have the path, and you can go to your work and go to the neighbors. So generally, that is the most important thing. And if you have a good path, then you can just make sure you have the adapted clothes, and then you can go outside and you just go to your work. So most countries I've seen where they have a lot of snow, they just continue their lives by just adapting with the right clothes and making sure the paths are clear. I see there's a question. Rian, I think you're muted.
I will connect. It's just a comment, so continue what you were saying about life.
Okay, so I did not read the comment, but I assume many people have experiences with snow. And it's true that in countries where you don't often have a lot of snow. When there is a lot of snow, they tend to be stuck and not know how to react to it. So the best thing to do is, if you know you will regularly get snow, to prepare ahead of it. You know you will need to have a shovel. You know you will need to have good boots and a good jacket. So these are the most important things. And like you say, adapt the buildings to it. So if you have adapted buildings, then you can just continue doing things. If you're cold all the time, of course, you can't do anything. So being designing the structures and the ways in advance, so that, for example, one thing you can do to make sure your door is always clear is to have a roof just in front of your door, a little roof structure that's slanted so that the snow will not pile up next to your door. And then that's already clear. You can even have walkways like that, or countries where they have like covered walkways that you can go from one side of the street to another, along the street where you have the shops, so you can easily go shopping, you can easily go to your work. So that is one way people adapt to that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's common. What she's writing is very common everywhere in the world. Actually, Pakistan is one of the lucky countries which has, like for example, in the south we have sun all year long. In Europe, almost there's except for southern Spain and Portugal, there's almost nowhere where there's sun all the time. So we have people who have not lived in Europe have no understanding of how important sun is in Europe. And in Pakistan we hate it. It's so much sun that we just don't like it. It's boiling all the time. So it's very different weather, and my point here is that there are technologies that are available that I was exposed to even 10-12 years ago, like passive housing, which uses almost no energy and allows the house to be warm or cold all year long. And it's just changed. I will give you an example. Last year I went to a 5-star hotel in a ski resort. It was $300 a night, and still the walls were so cold because they did not have enough insulation. The construction was old design. I had to use a heater, and that made me sick because everything inside my throat was dry because I was using the heater a lot. But if the installation was done properly, I wouldn't need the heater at all because there were enough people in the hotel to make the hotel warm enough, and the heating in the passageway would heat up the hotel. So it's not just that the poor people, but it's just that the technologies hasn't reached here, and that there's a huge opportunity for people who are in construction business in the European parts of the world, or China, or Korea or Japan, where there's a lot of snow, to export this to our country. It's a big country, and also take advantage of the opportunity here to sell it over here, and people can create and learn from experiences in the West and East actually about this. So thank you. Anything else which you think I should be discussing?
Yeah, I think that's a good point what you're saying, to learn from other cultures that have similar conditions. And it indeed doesn't have to be that it's Western countries that have the solutions. Certainly, some of the best solutions come from completely different places. Like, for example, a lovely one is the Russian ovens. I don't know if you know them, but they work by having a lot of mass that they heat up slowly. So it's a huge oven, and it's mostly it retains the heat in the oven itself, and then the heat is released very slowly through the entire day and even night, and that keeps the house warm the entire time. So it's some of the simple old solutions they can work even better than the more modern solutions. So these are coming back now. So there are a lot of people now in Russia giving workshops about making this kind of ovens. But you also have rocket stoves, which can also be made easily with fireproof bricks for only a few euros. I don't know what that is in your currency, I'm sorry, but it's quite cheap. And you can burn wood way more efficiently, up to 70% more efficiently. And these are, invented in other places and can be made with local materials. So heating is, I believe, and isolation, one of the most important subjects when you talk about living in colder climates. And there are many good solutions all around about that. And when we talked about that before, you also say, yeah, but, growing food in colder climates, people are telling me that it's not possible. So that's maybe a good subject to talk about a little now. Yeah. So, this is something where you can make a huge difference by creating a good microclimate. And there are a lot of good ways to do that. One of the ways is to grow your food in some kind of sunken greenhouse. So you dig just 1 meter in the ground, it can also be 1.5 meter, and you put a slanted roof on it. You have to have the right angle, but you can find that on the internet. And then you can have a place that doesn't freeze in the winter, or very rarely freezes at least, and the temperature remains more stable, the same temperature all year round, which can be very important for certain crops to grow. So then you can grow crops in the winter. But there are other ways. For example, by having some kind of terraces, you can create good microclimates. On the more southern sides, you can have certain crops that can still grow in the higher or the colder regions that couldn't grow if you just kept the land the way it is. So a good example is Sepp Holte. It's a farmer in Austria, I think. I am not entirely sure, but he grows food in the mountains, and he grows fruit at higher altitudes than anyone else by applying these kind of techniques. Sorry?
What's his name again?
Sepp Holte. Yeah.
Again?
Holte. I can put it in the comment after our conversation is ended, for those that are interested.
How do you spell it? I will Google it while we're talking.
I believe it's like this. I'm not 100% sure. So, but I have a book about him, but I would need to just look into my
permaculture.
Yeah, it's a permaculture practitioner that is especially focused on colder mountain regions. And the benefits are that he can grow fruit when the rest of people already sold out their crops. So their crops are later and they are more tasty, because apparently the higher you grow your fruit crops, the more the taste is improved. I don't know, I haven't tried the fruit, but that's at least, those are the claims, and he gets good revenue from that. So there could be good opportunities there for people that grow in mountain regions. The most important thing is to do some earthworks and to adapt the land so that it retains more water if you need the water, depending on the specific region where you are, and to have some differences in temperature where you can, have a slightly warmer microclimate. So you can change the shape of the land to grow more crops also. But it doesn't have to be that. You can also just say, okay, this is my climate, this is where I am. I'm just going to grow the kind of crops, edible crops that can grow here. And if you look around you, you will see there are always plants that grow, even in the winter. So of course, it's possible to grow plants. Certain kinds of kale, for example, they can withstand up to minus 20 degrees Celsius. So you can just grow kale in the winter. Of course, it's not only kale, but that's one of the examples I know, because I grow it myself, and we had minus 20 this year. So I can't tell you for sure it can survive that. So by choosing the right kind of crops, you can also grow in the winter.
So Sepp is from Austria.
Just
Yeah, Austria. Okay, young man.
you found him?
Yes, I found Seth and Elizabeth Holzer.
Ah, good.
Seth doesn't use Facebook, his wife does, so we'll talk with her.
Yeah, it's always good to find out the exact.
Cool. All right, so thank you so much for these tips. The rocket something
So,
stove.
rocket
My
stove.
brother is trying to manufacture them here, but instead of using wood, he's using wood waste and manufacturing small little bits, and that changes. And there's a fan inside, I believe, and the fan blows on the fire, and that makes the combustion at a very high rate and goes for longer. So he's making something similar here, and then he's for fuel. He's making using all kinds of waste and converting them into small little capsules, which can then be very very cheap, 10 cents a kilo, and then they burn it. So instead of using gasoline or gas, they use this technology for that. And the stove is like $50, so you can buy once, and then the fuel is very cheap. Alrighty, so yeah, so Kaniz has a good question. Uh, you want to answer it?
Well, one of the most important things when you will construct a house is the orientation and the location of the house. So, if you make sure that you don't have any cold winds directly to the house, this can make a big difference for the temperatures that you get. Also, make sure that places where you need the most of heat, that you can have sun in the winter, so you can direct the house to catch the winter sun. So some of the ways to make sure you don't have cold winds to your house is to plant trees at the right places, so that you block the wind. I don't know where the dominant cold wind is in Pakistan. Here, I know it in Belgium, but you can find that out easily by searching it on the internet. And then okay, in my region, the cold wind is mostly from that direction. And if you have then a hedge of trees that can stop the wind, then you will also have a warmer microclimate. So that can be quite useful. Other ways that people do that is by reflecting surfaces, like for example, having a small pond, if you can do it, to reflect the light to your house can also make it a bit more warm in the winter. So these are all techniques that are used during permaculture design for your house to make sure that you make the best use of the circumstances you have to have the warmest possible conditions for your house then. So for example, one of the things you have to avoid, of course, is to be on the top of a hill. If you construct your house on the top of a hill, you get all the cold winds directly and nothing will stop it. So these are some things you can think of when you're constructing to keep warm in the winter.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering that. I hope the session helped some people. And if you have more questions, there's always Google, there's always YouTube. And then after you're stuck with those places and you've spent enough time, then there's always Sabine. So you can always contact her, but first Google it, first YouTube it, so that you don't waste anybody's time and finding basic information that you can find on yourself. Yes, Sabine, you were saying something?
Yes, there are lots of free books and free videos on permaculture construction and permaculture design. So if you're constructing a house, do make sure to check that out before you start construction. It can save you a lot of money and make your house a lot more pleasant.
Wonderful. So For those who don't know what is permaculture, do you want to explain what it is, including me?
Give a short introduction. So it's a design method to make sure that you have a house or a garden or a project that's adapted to your specific circumstances. So in that way, there are certain guidelines and certain principles you can follow to make the best use of what's available around you and of the knowledge you have of the opportunities and limitations. So it's generally something that takes some simple rules and applies it to communities or houses or design of gardens or to grow food, to make it more efficient and to make it more adapted to your circumstances. Because what works here in Belgium might not work where you live. And that's how it is useful to just look at rules and principles instead of just copying results from someone else. And there are a lot of good introduction videos on permaculture, so make sure if you just type in permaculture in YouTube, you will have a very good time to watch nice videos.
So thank you, Sabine, again. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure you send this video to people who are from the northern areas or the cold areas, so that they can just have the awareness that there is so much more they can do with their life and their money and their systems, and make their life easier and not go through the hardship for absolutely no reason. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Sabine.
Thank you, Ian.
Poverty, disparity, malnutrition, health problems, lack of opportunities, and lack of jobs. These are the problems we saw all around us, and we wanted to take an action to solve them, as God helps only the ones who help themselves. We started ventures that will help to reduce these problems from the planet. For education, we created Rehan School, empowering 2 billion people who struggle to even read their own name in any language. Then we created Rehan University with a goal to allow people to learn from anywhere in the world, from the best minds of the world. Then we made Rehan Training, giving people skills to learn again from the convenience of their internet connection. For health, we created Rehan Health to create awareness videos on how things affect human beings and how we can reduce these effects. For opportunities, we are working on creating 100 open source business models that people can take franchise off for just $100 and make minimum of $300 a month. We want everyone in the world to be able to have an opportunity to make enough money for themselves and their families, to not be desperate to look for sources that are harmful to other human beings. We are Rehan Foundation, empowering humanity.